Well, let's take a look at another kind of fern, a fern that is not very fern-like. And this is the horsetail. Over here, whoop, over here on this phylogeny, we have this phylum of Pterophytes. And notice three items are listed, common names. Ferns, okay, we know what they are. Horsetails, subject of the current thing we're paying attention to. And whisk ferns, which are tropical plants. They're cool, but they occur in greenhouses, but not in Ohio naturally, so forget them for now. The horsetails are strikingly different from typical ferns. But what I'd like first to keep in mind is that the life cycles of the seedless vascular plants, besides ferns, are like ferns in that there's a dominant sporophyte, which is the thing you normally would point to and say there's a fern, there's a club moss, there's a spike moss, there's a quillwort, there's a horsetail. And the gametophyte, really small and inconspicuous, separately, independently existing, but you'd hardly notice it. That is the same for all of these plants, except that the plants look different than a fern does. So here's some facts about horsetails. They have these jointed hollow stems, and they're very rough. They contain silica. They were used for scouring pots and pans. Maybe they still are. The leaves are really tiny. We'll show you the leaves. A lot of seedless vascular plants were dominant and that formed forests and were like trees back in the Paleozoic era. Some of them formed what's now coal. The horsetails are homosporous. We'll formally and officially learn that, but I want to keep mentioning it. That's a plant that produces one type of spore that germinates into a hermaphroditic, bisexual, a gametophyte that has both male and female gamete-producing structures. The cool thing about horsetail spores is they have these flaps that move around when the air humidity changes and helps them burst out of the sporangia. The gametophytes are really small, and like all non-seed plants, sperm must swim through environmental water to reach the egg. That's because the sperm don't travel in the pollen grain the way they do for seed plants. And an example we'll see a lot of is this Scouring Rush. So here's some nice drawings that show some features of these these horsetails. Principally, we'll see that the spores are produced in these complicated aggregate structures. They're called a strobolus, or a cone, a spiral arrangement of sporangiophores. And these are basically, I think of them as being like umbrellas, and from the margin of them hang the sporangia. And these umbrellas, there's dozens on this picture here, are arranged in a spiral fashion. And here's a picture of the spores with the cool elaters that help the spores burst out of the sporangia. This is a picture that shows what fossil plants may have looked like when they were alive. And this one here is the one called Calamites, which is very, very similar to present-day horsetails, except it's big and it's woody. It's like a tree horsetail. Now the seed plants are the dominant superstars of the plant kingdom, and the the seedless vascular plants are just little diminutive understory things. How sad. So here's a picture that shows details of the life cycle. And again, it's the same life cycle as a fern, where we have a sporophyte that's the dominant, large, conspicuous thing that you would recognize out in the wild. And the gametophyte is a really small, inconspicuous thing you might miss, but it does what gametophytes do, which is produce sperm and antheridia and egg and archegonia. And sperm has to swim through environmental water to reach the egg. And here's a nice detailed picture of that little hexagon umbrella thing with the sporangia hanging off of it, each of which is packed with a neighbor in a spirally arranged strobolus, or cone, at the top. So here's a place where one can find Scouring Rush, Equisetum hyemale. And in this particular time, this picture was taken several years ago, whoa, it was all flooded. And the area that the ferns, the special ferns that are called horsetails, grow is actually underwater in this picture. Glub, glub, glub. See this sign here? This is a place one can park, and I'll show you what it looks like today.